what we're doing, Martin, is we're really focused on AI and hybrid workflows.
Whole context for this project is about writing a piece that would have been near impossible with existing technologies.
You're like, cool, here's what the filmmaker originally wanted, but it's cost prohibitive. Instead of saying, no, we can't do it, it's how can we do it?
How do you shoot a studio-level film entirely on iPhones and power it with AI? In this episode of Workflow Kitchen, we dive deep into the cutting-edge experiments coming out of USC's Entertainment Technology Center, where the future of filmmaking is being reimagined, from tethered iPhone rigs capturing cinematic quality footage to AI-driven workflows that reshape how stories are told. The ETC team is proving that low budget doesn't have to be low impact.
Hi, I'm Martin from iiodyne. This is a very special episode of Workflow Kitchen. Reason why? Because we've got the team from ETC here today. We've been working with them very closely. It's really cool. We're going to be talking iPhones. We're going to be talking multi-tethering. We're also talking iodine, obviously, but we're also talking AI. We're talking training data. It's going to be very, very cool. Let me introduce the team we have here. This is Erik. Say hi, Erik.
Hi, I'm Erik Weaver. I'm the lead over at ETC.
And this is our friend Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Ivy. I'm producing the current AI-driven grants with the ETC.
And last but not least, at the end, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Plotko. I'm one of the executive producers on this show.
So we've obviously been working together on the ETC project. It's been really cool, by the way. We love being a part of it. And Tom, give us a little bit of a kind of overview of what this year's ETC project looks like.
So what we've been doing for the past few projects that we've done at ETC is that when we bring in the original students or graduates who've been shortlisted by our peers over at USC, we bring them in and we have sessions with them so that we can acquaint them with the blue sky technologies that we're going to be working with. So we bring them into that fold. We want them to have the awareness of the technologies as they go back to their computers and start typing in their screenplays.
So you really are actually what you were talking about, that kind of that seamless kind of push through creative through to the technical. That's where you're coming into play, and you're actually going, okay, we've got to make these ingredients mix. You see what I did there? Because it's Workflow Kitchen. Never mind, way over your head. It's highbrow comedy, guys. Highbrow comedy. But that part of kind of mixing that in together, that's sort of very much going back and forth with the students and getting them to not only understand these kind of crazy new things that you're asking them to do, but then that just rolls itself back into the story again.
These are USC graduates. They're very forward thinking. They take all of that info in, and they do understand that the whole context for this project is about writing a piece that would have been near impossible with existing technologies. And these are new age filmmakers, very future ready. They're very receptive to feedback that comes from everywhere, because it all comes down to the script. You have to respond back to how the technology is responding to you.
Because talking about the kind of creative side of it, Sarah, how did you actually go through? How do you find the stories for ETC to actually kind of base all of this kind of tech test around? You know?
Well, the stories go through there's a pitch process, and then the stakeholders actually get to vote on the final project.
Oh, that's cool.
So they were like, we kind of knew which directions we were heading in and what we were going to test this year, and the stakeholders were like, we want these ones for that reason. So creatively, it's been fun. The writer-directors start with more of a concept and a pitch, and then we've been honing the stories creatively in scripts. So that's a little bit more of a traditional development process.
So it's one and then the other kind of thing.
But then it's also at a certain point where like, where does the tech not able to accomplish the goal? And then we have to pull back the story. But that's no different than the traditional filmmaking process. If you're in the indie world, you're like, cool, here's what the filmmaker originally wanted, but it's cost prohibitive. You're like, instead of saying, no, we can't do it, it's how can we do it?
It changed a little bit this year, didn't it? Because we did start getting into this AI component. And Erik, I love you dearly, but when you call me and you always, hey, I got an idea. Let's go, hey, so we're going to do this thing. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, but what's the catch, mate? And you're like, well, we're going to do it on iPhones. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, that seems fun.
Well, so actually that comes from the creator. So if you've ever listened to the director or the creator, what they did is they went out with FX3s, I believe it is, and they went and shot all these scenes, and then they just basically reprocessed it. He said, I used to have $1 million to shoot half a film, and now I have $3 million and I can't finish a scene. Right? And he said, so I decided I was going to do it a different way. So we thought we'd do the same thing. We'd replicate that, but let's use iPhones because there's also a lot of advantages to like the depth sensor and the other aspects of the camera
And we're
That's
talking
good.
spatial data, correct?
Spatial data. We're really focused on AI and hybrid workflows. We kind of see that the industry is not completely ready for purely generative, especially in regards to actors. So we want to see how basically we could take that live action performance, capture that, and design AI and the whole backgrounds around everything.
There's a lot to learn about that. So kind of talk to us a little bit about the sort of, kind of training it as well. It's actually turning into an effective tool, correct?
Yeah, so we're taking a model and then we're creating basically a LoRa or a smaller model that gives it that look and feel and image that we're looking for.
Okay.
So using tools like Comfy UI and then a series of different subtools. There's a lot of things out there. We're playing with everything from VO2 to Asteria Moon Valley to Runway and a few others.
Right.
So we've got some wonderful choices to play with from there.
This is what I love about the ETC product, because it's like you guys almost walk around the NAB show each year and go, what can we do? What can we do? And you're kind of like trying to collect as many toys as you can. I'm talking, Tom, from kind of a data point of view, right? Because now we're not just in a traditional production workflow. We're not just going, okay, this is the video, capture the video. Now we've got all of this extra kind of, for lack of a better word, almost peripheral data and metadata. It must kind of start to rapidly get out of hand, and then it all kind of has to be brought back in together in post. What does that look like?
So the destinations of all of these source materials are different, right? The people who are going to deal with volumetric data are specialists in that category of activity. When we capture anything on camera that has to go into kind of a compositing pipeline or an AI compositing pipeline, so it's really determined by where or who it's going to be handed off to. And then what's important for them to receive. One is the capture material itself, but there is also, like you mentioned, metadata. What is the information wrapping that material that's going to be of value within the pipelines that it's going to be entered into?
These are a lot of separate sort of lines or channels of data, which are almost deliberately keeping separate so that you can manage them. Then, in my mind, that must mean then, as far as kind of pre-production a little bit, and obviously through production, then the management of everybody's got to be clued into the process, right?
So there's a degree of traffic management, so to speak, of where the data is going. But again, just from the point, I mean, I think even before we collect any data, you need to have a pipeline in place that knows the destinations along the path. Because if you don't know that, it's like, you don't know what the optimal level of data collection is, especially coming into volumetric data and things like that. It can get out of hand very quickly. So knowing your end use case allows you to know where to temper it so that you're not going overboard and then killing everything down the line.
We were talking about how to shoot with the iPhone, how to get the data out of the iPhone, logistically how to make that happen on set. And obviously at the front end of all of that, it's all very much kind of like, oh, we're not sure, or we'll find out. But then on the day, you're having to now manage so many kind of technical nuances of, we can do this, but we're tethered. Oh, we can do this, but that means we've got to go now mobile and stuff like that. First of all, just straight up, how much of a nightmare was that? Or was it actually kind of like sort of relating that to the team, because you had a traditional production team? Was it pretty traditional?
We had a full team. We had probably 20 to 30 people somewhere on set moving around, doing different things. So I felt like we were very well set up for it. Yeah. I think probably you had to work harder than everybody else on that set. There was a lot of jumping around. It was a good day for you. No, but I mean, I think like because we were set up from beginning to end, we had a plan in place. Right. Everybody kind of knew where their role was within it, and because we were able to work in that manner, I didn't feel it was actually super chaotic.
It seemed traditional.
It
from
seemed
a production
very traditional.
Point of view.
Yeah,
you seemed to kind of have that control over it, which was it didn't seem to be operating like we were doing this crazy kind of like.
No, if you didn't know, and you were just watching it would have looked fairly normal, minus the fact that we had 3 iPhones set up.
Right.
And like I joke as a producer, like, usually by the time we get to set, my job is to sit there. And if I'm up and doing something, that means there's problems. And that shoot, I pretty much got to sit there most of the day. Just be like, looks good. Here's my input on this AI test.
That's just good organization.
So that means my job was done ahead of time. But yeah.
So let's kind of talk a little, because we've, I don't want to bury the lead. We've obviously got this kind of crazy piece of apparatus in front of us. But sort of working with this on set, it was really good fun. And we'll actually kind of show you some graphics now. But what we were doing was we were running the iPhone 16 Pro Max. We had the iOS native Files app running on there. and that was basically doing an SMB server connection through the Mac Studio, which was then going down to the Pro data. So that meant that everything that we shot was shooting directly down to the Pro data. Now that was cool when we got all that kind of running, obviously with the team, and then we kind of broke that out into 4 cameras, and that was also really cool. So that meant we had 4 iPhones shooting 4K UHD. I believe we've got up to 5994 now on the lens, so we're almost hitting 60 frames a second there. And that was Apple ProRes 422 HQ. 4 cameras shooting directly to RAID 6 encrypted storage by far, and I have to be kind of, my part on this. What I loved is when I hit record, it was recording, and then when I stopped recording, I didn't have to do anything. I basically turned into a capture engineer, or a capture technician, I guess you could say. Obviously these tests, don't get me wrong, they're fun. It kind of feels like we're in the garage. It feels like we're kind of breaking stuff and having fun. But what does this actually mean when this kind of carries over into the industry, when you actually implement this stuff forward? Because obviously there's a lot of people kind of like, I think maybe sort of slightly mystified on what AI and machine learning, what it can actually do for you as a creative tool and actually as a kind of usable tool versus, honestly, an awful lot of opinion-based stuff. How do you see this kind of actually fitting as we move forward with some of the stuff you've been testing?
I mean, the ecosystem of content creation, we're calling everything content these days, right? Even big budget blockbusters or what goes on your phone, is driven by economics at the end of the day. We have a limited commodity, which is essentially eyeballs and people's time.
Right.
And they're going to spend it somewhere. And if you can't attract them to spend it on your content, it's going somewhere else. And right now it's all about hyper-segmentation of audiences. We need a lot of content that appeases a lot of people across the bandwidth. So we can't produce that level of segmented content with the kind of budgets we had previously. So things have to become far more accessible. So I think the technology is somewhere intuitively ahead of its time, it looks like, but people are so responsive as creators that we're going to catch up with it very quickly, and it's all going to make sense. Right now it feels terrifying because we're right off the edge and it feels like we're going to drop, but I think as we're coming closer to it, we'll notice that projects like this will answer questions that will make it easier for people to go, oh, now I get it. Yeah. And now it looks like
it's giving them a little bit of a translation and a kind of, I mean, honestly, when we were at HPA talking about it, that was kind of what I liked, is you were actually presenting it as this, hey, this is nothing to be afraid of. This is actually something really cool. It's going to give you more creative time.
And it lets people think. They start chewing on what are my problems going to be, and engaging us in other ways, or looking at some of the materials we're putting out so they can answer some of the questions. Again, that's very cool.
I'm going to ask you one more question, though. And this is a weird one. In the middle of all of this, in the middle of all the work we've been doing, how are you guys sleeping? Not too bad?
Normally I sleep really good. The pillows here suck.
The pillows here are not great, I'll be honest. They're not great. I kind of just sort of create like this cocoon type thing where I'm just like still for for however many hours I get. But not too bad. Melatonin's is fantastic.
I'm getting up there in age, so I'm becoming more careful about how many hours I sleep and how well I sleep.
Yeah, it's a non-negotiable now. It used to be a kind of like, yeah, I'll wing it. No, it's got to be 6 hours minimum, and I'm probably
I'm the producer on these projects, so I sleep less than everybody on the projects currently.
That's just what you do
That is my
now.
role.
Yeah.
I will be taking a vacation when these are over.
That's probably a solid idea. I'd love to thank Erik, Sarah, and Tom. Thank you so much for coming to Workflow Kitchen. Please join us for the next episode, and love you lots. See you next time.
This is iOdyne Workflow Kitchen, where media professionals and technologists break down real-world workflows and explore smarter and faster ways to create. If you enjoyed it, hit subscribe to catch the next episode.